Here are 3 true dark web horror stories for you to listen to tonight. Before we start, please subscribe if you enjoy my content and want to stay up to date. And if any of these stories interest you, leave your thoughts in the comments. I would love to know what you guys think. Thank you for listening. When I graduated nursing school, all I could think about was escaping my tiny rural hometown and making a decent living. But jobs were scarce, and the only offer I got was at the chronically understaffed county hospital located an hour outside the city. The pay was a third of what my classmates were earning at prestigious hospitals, but it was a job, so I took it. Little did I know that choice would lead me down a dark path from which I'd never return. At first, the work was challenging but rewarding. Many of our patients had no insurance and relied on the hospital for basic care. We operated on shoestring budgets and outdated equipment, but I enjoyed the sense of mission. That feeling faded within a few months, as the harsh realities of the job began to weigh on me. The long shifts, combative patients, and constant understaffing took their toll. But the worst was the paltry paycheck that barely covered my tiny apartment and mountain of student loan debt. In those early discouraging days, I kept crossing paths with Dr. Klein, a new recruit. He'd been some fancy neurosurgeon at a downtown hospital before joining our staff. No one knew why he traded his luxurious practice for this dump. But he carried himself like he was still at the top, walking the halls in his expensive suits and watches. One day, when I was at my lowest, Dr. Klein invited me to lunch in his office. He said he had a business proposal that could make my money problems disappear. I didn't understand how a doctor could help with my finances, but I agreed to hear him out. Over that lunch, Dr. Klein laid out a terrifying scheme, offering to pay me 3 times my salary if I helped carry it out. He explained that he and another doctor were planning to sell newborn babies on the dark web to the highest bidders. Whenever there was a stillbirth, they would show the deceased infant to both sets of parents, telling each it was theirs. Then, they would take the living baby and sell it on the black market. My role would be straightforward: forge the paperwork to cover up what they'd done, and deliver the infants to a van parked behind the hospital whenever we had a package ready. As long as I kept quiet, I'd be handsomely rewarded. I sat stunned, unable to grasp what I was hearing. Sell babies? Was this respected surgeon actually proposing kidnapping and human trafficking? As a nurse, I was devoted to protecting life. How could I even consider being part of something so horrible and illegal? But Dr. Klein had a practiced answer for all my objections. He claimed they would only choose babies who wouldn't be missed from parents who were drug addicts or transients. The infants would go to wealthy overseas couples who couldn't adopt legally. Far better than growing up unwanted in the dysfunctional foster system. And of course, he appealed to my financial desperation, repeating the salary number that would end my money headaches overnight. In the end, my principles crumbled in the face of cold hard cash. I agreed to become part of their sick conspiracy. So began my year-long career as a clandestine baby trafficker. With Dr. Klein as my mentor, I quickly learned to suppress any guilt over our actions. I told myself the parents were grieving over a child they never knew, and the babies were better off, and I couldn't argue with the hefty weekly payments. But early one morning, as I was making a hushed delivery behind the hospital, I felt a hand clamp over my mouth. Strong arms dragged me into a waiting vehicle. A hood was thrown over my head and secured. I begged them not to hurt me, sobbing that I'd do anything they asked. The hood was removed what seemed like hours later inside a windowless room. 2 men identifying themselves as cyber police interrogated me. They knew everything. Every trip, every dollar I'd made. They told me I now worked for them, helping set up Dr. Klein and the others for prosecution. If I didn't cooperate, I'd disappear, just like those infants. So here I am, still undercover with Dr. Klein as we arrange more sales. He considers me his loyal protege, utterly unaware that I'm now feeding everything to the police. I know when this ends, my life expectancy will be very short, whether I'm in prison or on the streets. Dr. Klein has connections reaching far beyond the hospital walls. For now, I'm still alive. Sometimes I wish I had refused Dr. Klein's offer at that fateful lunch. But it's too late for regrets. All I can do is keep playing my part until the horror I allowed finally drags me under. When I was a reckless youth in the early days of the internet, I started frequenting the dark web to buy drugs. The streets in my hometown were dry, so I turned to the anonymous black markets on the hidden parts of the web that I accessed through Tor. Back then, the dark web was still new and unknown to most people. After making a few small purchases, I came across a vendor offering an unbelievable deal: $11,000 worth of high-grade product for only $500 cash if we met in person. My street dealers never had this quality of stuff, and considering the tiny price, it was too good to pass up. Against my better judgment, I agreed to the deal and set up a meeting. We chose a secluded park near my house at 2:00 a.m. for the handoff. As the meeting time approached, my anxiety grew. What was I doing meeting some anonymous criminal in the middle of the night? I knew nothing about this guy except he had all my personal info from our online interactions. I decided to bring my pocket knife for protection, though it did little to ease my worries. I arrived at the park early and waited nervously. At 2:25 a.m., a large, bald man in a long black coat approached hurriedly and shoved a backpack into my hands. When I gave him the $500, he became angry and aggressive, claiming we had agreed on $1,000 for the drugs. Before I could respond, I heard a gun click directly behind my head. Another man had sneaked up behind me. The bald guy grabbed me by the neck and slammed me against a tree, putting the gun to my temple. He demanded the rest of the money, but I swore I only had $500 on me. The man behind me rifled through my pockets to confirm, while continuing to dig the pistol into my skull. Finding only the $500, the bald man whispered chillingly in my ear that I had just made the biggest mistake of my meaningless little life. He promised I'd regret crossing him as the other man cracked me over the head with the butt of the gun. When I came to, the sun was starting to rise. I was alone in the park with a splitting headache. I looked in the backpack hoping to find the $11,000 worth of drugs I had stupidly believed I was getting. But the bag contained nothing except a few bottles of over-the-counter painkillers. I had been robbed of the $500 and had no one to report it to since my actions were highly illegal. In the following years, as the dark web grew rapidly into a massive black market, I learned about even more disturbing things taking place in its lawless underbelly. There were hidden sites and forums where people discussed and shared deeply disturbing desires. Things like rape, murder, pedophilia, and cannibalism. One urban legend kept popping up about an underground restaurant, supposedly located near the US-Mexico border, that catered to wealthy cannibals. According to rumors, they would kidnap women and young girls to be butchered alive and served as exotic meat dishes at exorbitant prices. Eventually, these rumors were confirmed to be horrifyingly real when flyers started showing up in my hometown of Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, offering cash for females to work at a special restaurant across the border. A friend of mine who was involved in distributing the flyers was able to provide more chilling details. He asked his contact, the man who recruited him to hand out flyers, about where the restaurant got its unique meat. The man just laughed and said not to worry about it. He hinted they were making serious money by supplying exotic meats to certain groups in America, willing to pay premium black market prices for the experience. Not long after the flyers appeared, women in our community started vanishing without a trace. The police claimed they had simply moved away voluntarily. But I knew one of the missing girls, Angela, and she would never leave without telling her family. In total, 12 young women and girls disappeared over the next 2 months. Despite the rash of unexplained disappearances, there were no serious investigations, no media coverage, and no bodies ever found. The people recruiting for the special restaurant vanished as well once the girls started going missing. My friend lost his job handing out flyers and refused to discuss the situation, becoming withdrawn and paranoid. To this day, none of the missing women or girls have ever been located. Angela and the 11 other victims remain unaccounted for, though I'm convinced they were captured and butchered, sacrificed to satisfy the depraved appetites of wealthy cannibalistic patrons of the dark web. The authorities refuse to acknowledge the possibility of a cartel-run cannibal kitchen supplying exotic meats to American buyers. This chilling experience showed me the true horrors that can lurk on the dark web's lawless fringes. Beyond drugs and vice, genuinely evil people operate in the shadows, empowered by anonymity to make their darkest fantasies come true while avoiding accountability. My youthful recklessness exposed me to depravity I'll never forget. The dark web is not a harmless playground. It can enable nightmares. My hands shook as I opened the small package that had arrived in the mail. Nestled inside the box were 4 purely white human teeth, 2 incisors from the upper jaw and 2 from the lower. They appeared pristine, having been extracted from cadavers shortly after death. To think that these tissues used to reside in a living person's mouth gave me chills. Yet, in my desperation, I had convinced myself that obtaining these illicit teeth was necessary for my education. As a first-year dental student, I had sailed through the textbook lessons on anatomy and procedures, but actually practicing with the tiny instruments on authentic teeth was a different skill altogether. My university in Mexico City had a limited supply of specimens for students to use. We had to sign up months in advance to get just an hour with the practice teeth. Even then, the well-connected upper years with family and dentistry got first pick. My practical scores suffered from lack of hands-on training. No matter how many textbooks I read, the fine motor movements required for fillings and extractions eluded me. I knew that purchasing my own human teeth for practice over the summer was the only way to hone these skills and avoid failing second year. But the traditional channels for acquiring such samples were closed to me. Out of options, I turned to the dark web. Late one night, using an anonymity browser, I navigated to a site claiming to sell human body parts. There I found a vendor willing to ship 4 teeth for a reasonable price, likely harvested from the dead by grave robbers. My moral compass spun at this discovery, but ambition quieted my reservations, and I placed the order. Now the illicit teeth had arrived at my doorstep. Horrified yet fascinated, I set up a workspace in my bedroom. Carefully, I began practicing common dental procedures on the samples, scraping away decay, filling cavities with composite resin, smoothing down cracks and chips. At first, my hands still shook from nerves and guilt. But as the weeks passed, I gained confidence in wielding the small scalers and drills. The teeth became worn and mangled from my amateur efforts. Still, it was working. My skills improved daily. By late summer, I could fashion a veneer or extract a molar in minutes. I knew every groove and ridge on the black market teeth. My dexterity had reached levels I thought impossible once before. But now I faced a new dilemma: what to do with the grisly specimens that got me here. Tossing them in the trash could implicate me if discovered, yet keeping them around seemed morbid, like relics from a crime scene. I decided the only way to bury this chapter for good was to literally bury the teeth. Under the cover of night, I hiked deep into the woods outside town with a shovel in hand. The rich scent of wet earth filled the air, remnants of an earlier rainstorm. In a remote clearing, far from any trails, I began to dig, piling the fragrant soil to one side. When the hole seemed deep enough, I gently placed the teeth inside and covered them up, smoothing over the dirt till it looked untouched. As I hiked back, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. The teeth could no longer testify to my moral compromise. In nature's embrace, they were rejoining the cycle of decay and rebirth we all experience. My transgression no longer haunted me. I made a silent pledge that night to seek only ethical ways of advancing my skills from then on. Though the teeth had served me for a time, the ends did not justify the corrupt means. Returning to campus in the fall, I applied myself fully to each lab session. My renewed dedication showed. Soon I was scoring top marks in all our practical dental exams. My professor remarked that it was as if I had undergone a magical transformation into a master technician over the summer. I just smiled humbly, letting her believe it was natural talent unlocked through hard work. And that was partly true. Consistent, ethical effort paved the way to excellence. The missing piece, those illicit lessons in the darkness, I took with me to the grave of the stolen teeth. Now, many years later as a dentist running my own practice, I make sure to procure ethically obtained specimens for any students training under me. I allow them to freely take home our practice equipment if they ask, And I share all the knowledge that came so painfully to me, so that others walk a straighter path. Guiding the next generation gives me a sense of purpose, softening memories of my own stumbles. Beyond the office, in serving vulnerable communities, I find the meaning that had eluded me years ago. The work connects me to something larger, the basic human needs we all share. No moral shortcuts or back alley dealings can compete with the fulfillment of caring for others. Though my road has not been smooth or virtuous at every turn, I feel blessed to end up where I am, where integrity guides and sustains everything I do. For those setting out on their own journey in pursuit of a worthy goal, I say merely this: stay true to who you are as darkness and light both descend. The rewards of traveling with virtue as your compass prove lasting, shining their warmth long after lesser flames burn out. If you enjoyed these stories, share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you had similar encounters, please share your experiences too. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe as it supports me a lot.